This episode is broken into two parts. The first 30 minutes or so is general advice on incorporating and picking metaplot elements, where I completely failed to mention that I have my own Storyteller Vault text, Strange Yesterdays, which provides a stack of alternatives to each element of the late 2nd edition early revised metaplot. Starting at about the 31-minute mark, we switch to talking about Michael's book, Riddle of the Sphinx, where Michael outlines an absolute bucket of options for creating metaplot events between revised and M20, or setting background and lore if you're running a contemporary game. It's 200 pages and it's a blizzard of options, and Michael brings in sects that I don't even remember. Both of these texts are available in the Storyteller's Vault. Just search Strange Yesterdays or Riddle of the Sphinx, and links are in the show notes. With that, on with the show. Hi, Mage fans. This is your host, Terry Robinson with Mage the Podcast, and joining me today is author and mage aficionado, Michael Mercere, and we are going to talk about Metaplot, Revised, how to integrate this stuff into your game, making stuff up from nowhere, and also Michael's absolutely lovely book, Riddle of the Sphinx, which is available on the Storyteller Vault, and just kind of fills in all the ways you can ascend, how to ascend between the years seemingly 1999 and 2023. Michael, is that an acceptable encapsulation of you and your work?
Hi, Mage fans. Sure. You know, I'm so glad to be back on Mage the Podcast. You may know me as also Thrice Rate or Harko on the server, but my nom de Mage, nom de Ascension.
Yeah, I like it. Or nom de Storyteller's Vault, the one.
Nom de Storyteller's Vault is
Yeah.
Michael Mercere.
And we're going to talk about Metaplot and such.
I thought we were going to talk about which hermetic house we would unilaterally purge.
Patron content. So another episode we have brewing is literally all the hermetic houses. And then
Yes,
Michael and I
yes.
looked over the list and we're like, this is going to take us a month. we're going to have the month of Hermes. Like February is now Pymander month. And it would just be kind of that 3-part. But yeah, I guess what house would you unilaterally purge? I know my answer.
Let's keep them in suspense until the Euthanatos section.
Okay.
Okay. Isn't that what the Euthanatos would
Yeah,
do?
we took out House Janissary. We'll do it again. Don't make us.
Yeah.
I do like the term Jassassin, though. I thought that does roll
Jan
off.
Assassin.
Yeah, it does kind of roll off the tongue. Anyway, Metaplot. So kind of the basic question is, what is Metaplot? And I've had enough arguments about what this is to have at least my working definition, which is a metaplot is a set of changes to a game's setting that occur across a publishing run within an edition. Generally, this is done in the form of having a storyline of some sort, where the key thing about a metaplot is things change. For instance, this is different from, quite simply, an expansive setting. For instance, in Exalted, it is always realm year 768. The Scarlet Empress has disappeared 5 years ago. It is the Year of the Mouse, Fire Cycle, Bronze Era of the 11th Epic of the Dragon-Blooded Shogunate. That is always where the books are. When a new book is released, it is still that day. And there's just new areas of the map or new people that are filled in. And likewise, with Trinity, we get different eras, but we are not getting an implied change over time. Also, just kind of as a snarky comment, my flippant answer is Metaplot is whatever Paradox says it is, because for Lore of the Traditions, we were told no Metaplot changes. And I'm like, cool, I'm not going to introduce any Metaplot, but there will be a series of events that change the nature of the game world, if that's okay. Which reminds me of a time a friend said, blank isn't alcoholic, she just needs to drink to have fun. And I'm like, okay. But Mage as a game is relatively light on key characters that are active in the world at current, and there's really only been one large metaphysical change. Events occur, but besides the Avatar Storm, little has touched all of the named factions in the game. So what is Metaplot to you, Michael?
Well, I mean, I think that's a great definition. You know, in my experience running Mage, and I've run and played Mage since it came out in 1993. Is that right?
Yes.
1993?
Yes.
Yeah. I completely ignored the Metaplot. So Metaplot is something to be ignored.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I would matter. I guess we were always more interested in sort of what our individual characters were doing, and we're just less interested in kind of like what the NPCs were doing. Also, the other thing about the Metaplot, I think, and I'll get into sort of the positive things about it, but one of the negative things about it is that you really have to follow the line to really get it, you know, and particularly Mage's Metaplot is spread across tradition books, Ascension, Manifesto of the Sphinx, novels, right? So like there are still aspects of the metaplot that I'm not entirely clear on because I don't know where they are.
Yeah, it's like following a comic book, and it's not uncommon that you'll have like a big comic book event and you're like, "Oh, you missed that
Yeah.
because this one character was in Ghost Rider 117 for 3 pages, and that explains why he has green shoes now and everyone calls him Daddy." And you're like, "Oh, okay, that's a thing."
It's not because it says daddy on his t-shirt.
I would be fine with that if a character in Ghost Rider Ghost Daddy.
Or maybe he has a daddy tramp stamp on his lower
That
back.
I get behind, just like Porthos.
Yeah, so I think that was mainly sort of why, because honestly, until I started following your podcast, a lot of the mage books I hadn't read. I think we'd read most of the tradition books, but a lot of the other ones we hadn't read. And that was one of the good things about the White Wolf games is that you can run the game just from the core book. You don't need any of the additional material. You've got everything you need. And so that was largely what we did. In writing this book, I came to appreciate how Metaplot can produce plot. You've got these things going on, particularly with a game like Mage. I think it can be really challenging because it's so open-ended. You're like, what do I do with this? Do I need a PhD to play this? Metaplot can sort of offer you some guide stones or guidelines or a place to start, right? So Metaplot offers a general shape, right? Like a sort of like a little bit more of a structure in what can be a really overwhelming world.
Yeah, for me, there are kind of 3 benefits to having a metaplot. It feels like the world you're gaming in is alive. And a storyteller can do this on their own. There are other games that have faction move mechanics and ways to make the world change, and maybe like a weather engine. When each book adds to an ongoing story, it creates the sense that you are in a larger world. A lesson I learned with the Lore of the Traditions Kickstarter is that some people just like reading mage books and they don't really play. I certainly did as a kid. And a metaplot gives you a sense of something going on that kind of does give you inducement to read the next book, and you get to see characters grow up and age and mature. Like looking at, the name suddenly escaping, the Euthanatoy gal between second edition and revised is a hell of a sea change. Not Mitzi Zimmerman, not Theora Hetrick?
Yeah, Theora. Wait, she's
Or
Senex's
no, Amanda Jensen.
apprentice.
Which one do I always confuse
Amanda
the two?
Jensen is the one with the Nephandic avatar.
Yeah.
That Senex is trying to redeem. Theora is House Helicar.
Yeah, that's what it was. Seeing how Amanda Jensen changes over time, you're like, oh, it gives you an idea of what can happen. Metaplot also gives you an idea of ways in which the game world can change. If in one book we're introduced to the adept Angeli Soledad in the Celestial Course book as a notable character, and then we see Naja Bantu die stopping the Ascension Warrior, and then we get a later book talking about how the chorus is in disarray, and then we see her take the mantle of leadership after being the heir apparent after Simon Payne, we get an idea of how a new Primus could be found. Mage books often depict the vagaries of politics, but Metaplot and in-world fiction gives us the details. Tradition book Euthanatoy, or the Euthanatoy's tradition book, pardon me, gives an outline of what Mitzi Zimmerman thinks of all the primi, and we get to see a trial, and we get to see the standard of evidence, and we get to see how that works. Mage justice is described in other books, but this gives us an in-world example of how it works, as well as kind of outlining who the primi are and how they act in the world. The way I like to put it is it gives you binocular vision by seeing the game world move. And as Michael said, it gives a lot of plot hooks to latch onto. If you have a character gaining in power, Metaplot gives the group the ability to latch onto different events at different levels and provide ways to talking to other players. It creates a shared language between people playing the game. Maybe a group of disciples goes to Bangladesh to try and clean up after the death of Zapathasora, the risen Ravnos antediluvian. A group of adepts instead may try to manage the fallout in the Umbra of the devastation of the rise of an antediluvian. A group of masters may join in an attempt to support the Kuijin Bodhisattva that try and stop Zapathasora. Or we may have a game where you are the technocracy trying to figure out, do we nuke this thing? How many people is it going to kill? And that's fun to talk to other players and storytellers about. One of my favorite examples of kind of the new cleavages that Metaplot can create is we get the event, the rise of the antediluvian, the ravenous antediluvian during the Week of Nightmares. And the technocracy is ultimately split. They're able to bring this thing down with orbital mirrors eventually and a neutron bomb. But the Union has 3 factions of holy shit, this was just one vampire and we had to nuke it. And there are more. What the dink? We are unprepared. And another one that said, we got by on the skin of our teeth. We really need to arm up. And another one that's like, we killed Kane's grandkid. Union, union, union. Those are all legitimate viewpoints to take. So I think it gives interesting cleavages that can develop in the world. And that, just like a comic book crossover event, gives you suddenly a new cleavage in the world that everyone else is going to have to align around. And it gives you a second view of everyone in the setting. And I think that's kind of important. What other benefits do you see to having Metaplot, or what other things have you grown glad to see when Metaplot exists?
So I'm glad you asked, because we're going to move into the revised Metaplot apologist section of this episode. So for those of you who like the revised Metaplot, welcome. For those of you who don't, we apologize.
Yeah.
For what is going to come next. In writing this book, I really came to appreciate the revised Metaplot, not necessarily in its details, but in what it was attempting to do, as far as it really did shake up the world of Mage. And for me as an author, it allowed me to sort of like, oh, we've had this great feat. Everybody has to respond to the Avatar Storm. Everybody has to respond to the large technocracy pogroms, the destruction of Duezzetep, the crash of the digital web, right? Like, these were all crises that forced mages to rise or fall or perish, or even perhaps stagnate in mediocrity. But you have to do something. Otherwise, is it really ascension?
Choosing not to respond is a response.
Choosing not to respond absolutely is a response. And I could see, a variety of factions wanting to do that. The traditions may not want to respond because they're too traditional. The technocracy may be waiting for the right time. There's lots of reasons not to respond. Catastrophes allow for an excuse for new growth, discoveries, and potential plots. The consequences are hubris, are fun, and make great stories, whether they're the player's consequences or their mentors or their elders, the consequences of theirs, right? So it's sort of like the Magician's Apprentice, the Disney movie, dun, 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 dun,
Sorcerer's
dun,
Apprentice, yeah.
the Sorcerer's Apprentice, right? So like, but what if Porthos is the one creating all those brooms, right? So crisis breeds necessity, which brings great change. And I think that, if anything, mages are creatures of great potential, but also of necessity. We need to find a way to change the world this way. We need to push this idea. We need to change the consensus. We need to ensure our tradition stays alive. And that continues to motivate mages. The revised Metaplot reshuffles the hierarchies. You've got new primi, you've got new opportunities to create new NPC leadership, and you have the potential for players to enter into those leadership positions. And so now, rather than having orders handed down to them, they're the ones that now have to not only give those orders, but now they're actually having to deal with the ones, whatever creatures, whether they're Umbrood or oracles or whatever other powerful beings there are in the Tellurian. Now you have to take their calls. And that may not be necessarily as great as it may seem. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. Shaking up the traditions, because my book focused on the traditions, I didn't really look quite as deeply into the technocracy. Shaking up the traditions to some degree creates an opportunity for more player involvement. Now the old wizard problems are your problems, as we mentioned. Crafts can be drawn closer into the Ascension War as enemies, as frenemies, as friends, as something somewhere in between. The Sphinx provides an easy, low-hanging fruit for traditions to get up again and fight back. And we've got a bunch of interesting options that can either be taken as a whole or a la carte. What if it was just Horizon and Duezzetep that got blown up? What if that happened, but also there was a rise in technocratic pogroms? What if the crafts are conspiring in the background? What if the storm allowed the Nefandi to come back in? What if it was just some big umbral storm, wasn't exactly the Avatar, but it made things inconvenient or put stress on the awakened society? I think the digital web crash is great. It offers all kinds of opportunity for weirdness. And then, of course, you've got this mysterious NPC of the Sphinx that could literally be anything you want it to be.
And this is something that we get to tailor for our games. You both get to pick which events occur and what they actually mean. So Michael put together this wonderful list of all the major beats that occur at least through the beginning of Revised. And we have Xerxes Jones detonating the Ghost Nuke, which kicks off the Sixth Great Maelstrom, scours the underworld. Enoch is no more, is bombed by Stygia with a relic nuke. This, plus the rise of Zapathasora, the antediluvian of the Ravnos clan, best clan, all the death from that causes the Avatar Storm to start. I just love that the Ravnos went from, we're pickpockets and raskabouts to, in Revised, no, we've been waging a war against the Kuei-jin for thousands of years, and we are the only thing preventing you from being curb stomped by the 10,000 heroes. And I'm like,
yeah, talk about Metaplot.
You got a little more interesting in there. I found you have hobbies. I don't know any of your friends.
Let me tell you, as someone who played 1E Vampire, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
Did anyone have that on their bingo cards? Immortal war against the Chinese. No? Okay.
Mark, you get $5.
Certainly not from the Ravnos.
Yes. We have the explosion of Duizatep, an event called the Conflagration. And a lot of these actually happen in second edition. Like it's called the Revised Metaplot, but it's kind of the lead up that sets the stage for what is revised. Like when you have a big event, it is the crazy event before the cliffhanger, as it were, as opposed to the opening of the next movie. We have the crash of the digital web that occurs firmly in second edition, kills a lot of mages. There's also a reading that there was another crash tied with the Week of Nightmares, so that there may have been two crashes in relatively close succession. The Avatar Storm rises partially due to these, all of this death, plus all of the magic being thrown around, and that makes it very hard to visit the Umbra. Disembodiment now affects theoretically everyone. It is you are no longer safe if you are just staying in a Horizon realm to be there for an arbitrarily long period of time. We have the destruction of Concordia and Horizon. A character called the Ascension Warrior appears and is like, "You're all bitches." And Chris DeVal says, "I'm not." And the Ascension Warrior is like, "You're the biggest bitch of all," and turns him into gold. And everyone else is like, "Tits," and is eventually stopped at the cost of a lot of primi.
I just want to say to the listeners that that's literally what happened.
That's canon.
Yeah, that is canon. Yeah.
To summarize, almost all mage encounters, fuck you. No, fuck you.
Yeah.
And one of those FUs is bigger than the other one. The Horizons, the Stronghold of Hope, is functionally destroyed. Technocracy is given an opportunity to break in. It is sacked, and everyone just kind of lets it rot in the Umbra. The Technocracy is like, traditions are really in disarray. This seems like a good opportunity to kill people. And they're really like, you know what we love? Murder. What are we going to do now? Murder. They really kick up the gear on that, at least for a while. Then the Week of Nightmares occurs. The Ravenous Antediluvian arrives, as Michael put it, too cute, so the Technocracy nukes it from space. So the Technocracy is
really adorable.
Yeah.
If you want to see, it's on the White Wolf Wikia. It's very adorable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a orbital space mirrors to weaken it. It summons a typhoon. Some bodhisattvas of the Kuei-jin arrive and fight with it for a while, weaken it to the point where the Technocracy is like, okay, we're just going to nuke it. You have the Masasa War, where House Titulus is like, well, magic is changing. We've lost access to the masters. Seems like a good time to try and take our old shit back. And that doesn't go particularly well. See our episode on blood treachery on that one. And then we get some other events that may or may not have occurred, where Senex is like, where Porthos is like, we should let the young lead. And Senex is like, good idea, but I'm going to have literally every Euthanatos mage cleanse reality with me. And you're like, okay, that's another choice. We get the Manifesto of the Rogue Council that appears, and these weird messages that start to appear. You may or may not have the New Horizon Council formed in New Zealand, as it is mentioned in M20.
Well, yeah, but then there's the one in LA, though, too.
Yeah, at the Weird Theater, they're like, we used to have an Umbra Realm. Now we have a community theater.
Yeah. No. This is the one in Los Angeles where they're like, just kidding. We're not really a council. We just wanted to hose Jody Blake.
I'm thinking of the one from the opening of Ascension.
Isn't that the Jody Blake one where they like nuke her or imprison her or something
in M20?
That's in Revised. It's in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay. I'm just thinking of the one in the beginning of Ascension where everyone gets together, they have the chair there, and then the Technocracy attacks.
Yeah.
and there you have it, the best summary of Mage Metaplot. And you're like, wait, which theater are we talking about?
Well, whenever it comes to like the Council of Nine, after a certain point, I just feel like it becomes an episode of 90 Day Fiance, and I just can't figure out what's going on at all.
But those are kind of the basic background events, and you can remix these and come up with some really neat things. Like, what if Xerxes Jones ignites the spirit nuke in the Well of Oblivion, and we get a Maelstrom but no Avatar? The Shroud is now the angry thing, and suddenly the Euthanatoi are in the positions that the Kavadi Dream Speakers were, and they need to undergo a pivot. And now they're like, we're cut off from the realms of death. Maybe we become more fate tied. Or so you have this thing where they're somewhere between House Fortunae and the Akashiana in terms of pursuing things. Maybe the Ascension Warrior was able to kill all the Primi except 2. And what happens if it's Julian Spence and Roger Thackeray, the head of the Society of Ether and the Virtual Adepts? I think a lot of people would find it weird that the 2 most technomantic Primi are the ones that are left. What if it's everyone but Tom Smithson Laughing Eagle, and suddenly someone who's like, I'm too old for this shit, is like, shit, I don't really have a choice in the matter? What if the Ascension Warrior is a time-traveling Shazar, who we all know is the most badass of mages because he gets 3 familiars. No one else gets 3 familiars.
Did he get them at Petco?
Yeah, I think he picked them up across time. I think you get a token familiar automatically if you sleep with Mariana of Balador. You just get a peacock as a familiar. That's her version of mage hepatitis.
My headcanon is that he got them at the Animal Refuge League in Balador.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And why no one else picked up.
There's
why
some sort of cat.
Why did you have a wolf here? I'm not asking. I'm just taking it with me.
You can do yoga with various like abandoned familiars in Balador.
I hope one of them is just like a cat that sounds like Paul Lind. That would be perfect. This is something I now want in my game. He never really died. But one complication that we run into is people frequently treat the metaplot as all or nothing, and they treat it as a mandate. When a table can go through the metaplot and say, we want to do this and this. My recommendation, though, is to just kind of have this conversation ahead of time and say, hey, I would like to do a chronicle where we just go through the Week of Nightmares and it's Fallout. Cool beans, we're going to take it as it goes, or we're going to follow the Sphinx metaplot. Another table may explicitly say, hey, I want the revised world, but I really want the Avatar Storm to die down because I really want a character that's into spirit or that has the ability to go to the Umbra or something like that, or the digital web crash didn't occur. As always, have the conversation. Any thoughts about metaplot as instrument?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way to look at it. I think part of the edition wars was that people felt I think that they felt control had taken away from them for what they could do at the table, right? They were like, this isn't the mage I wanted to play, and now I'm sort of stuck with this. And my philosophy is that when game developers hand you lemons, just make some lemonade, honey. You'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Take the elements you like, drop the elements you don't like, and dial it up, dial it down. You're the storyteller. Decide what you want to do at your table.
And you propose kind of a framework on how forward Metaplot is. What is that?
So I suggested Metaplot could be foreground, middle ground, or background, depending on what your needs are. So the example I gave in our outline, background metaplot provides mood and theme, but no direct plot. The Avatar Storm has wrecked the world, and the Cabal must try to survive amongst its ruins. The digital web crashed and now exists in a frazzled state of instability. Rumors of the technocracy pogrom against chantries all over North America are making the Awakened Society very tense and paranoid. The characters hear about the hunt for Vormars, but aren't necessarily involved. Perhaps the players will investigate some of this, or perhaps this just provides spooky atmospheric backgrounds for them to tell their own stories. A middle ground metaplot is an element that allows, as Terry says, for a plot to fall out the other end, but is not a plot in and of itself. The Avatar Storm wrecked the world, and the Chantry must deal with the indirect consequences such as refugees, angry Umbrood, and a jumbled otherworld. The digital web crashed, but the threat of a second crash has web denizens in a panic. Technocracy pogroms have displaced craft mages who are asking for sanctuary. The characters run into cabals, hunting Vormas in their own adventures. Players choose whether to address these directly or pursue their own interests. And a foreground metaplot option are the plots in and of themselves. The Avatar Storm wrecked the world, but it's over. Old masters return from Earth from the other worlds, looking for somebody to blame. The digital web crashed, and the players are on a team doing prevention and root cause analysis. The Sphinx inspires the Cabal to join the hunt for Vormas. So I like to think of Metaplot as spices. They can be increased or decreased according to taste. The The Avatar Storm was short, but transformed the traditions. Anyone who is ephemeralized or has stepped sideways is immediately disembodied, or has a form of reverse disembodiment where mages can go across into the mundane world for short spells. The digital web, it came back online, but is way more dangerous than before. The web returns and is now dominated by an infinite mountain of strange creatures to come down from. Vormos is rumored to be dead, but that may be exaggerated. Vormos has died, but this part of his plan to merge with Oblivion, but Xerxes' bomb complicates this. Now his new class of spirits. Technocracy pogroms have mysteriously de-escalated. Technocrats pull out of a certain urban area's abandoned nodes, leave the realms. The Sphinx is on the lips of every mage you encounter, but just creates more confusion and contention. Rumors that that the Sphinx has some mimetic virus created by the New World Order. So, like I said, you can bring in a little salt, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of spice, a little bit of sugar, and kind of make your own metaplot. Draw it together and flavor it as you like.
And just in the same way that a wave approaching the shore is going to have a different reflection depending on what meets it, the way the metaplot unfolds is going to differ in your game. What I liked was Michael brings up what I'll call second order metaplot, where, okay, there is an Avatar Storm. How do the Umbrood view this? Maybe there are spirits that have been terrorizing an area that are now cut off. They don't have the ability to cross over either, but maybe there are other ones that protect an area that are no longer receiving the offers and oblations that they previously received. We get the idea of the War of the Ruins, that Doizatep is destroyed, but it is the greatest concentration of magical knowledge and power that has ever existed. So even its charred ruins represents one of the most powerful gatherings of magical force in existence. And this war rages to try and pick up those pieces. It was also one of the densest places of portals to the other worlds to have existed. So when you introduce this metaplot event, consider how that's going to interface with what's already in your game and how that's going to ripple through. Mages rarely operate in a vacuum. Generally, they're going to have a mortal community that they're tied to. They may have certain other types of night folk that they may also have regular engagements with. Crossover games are very popular. They probably have a tradition or a faction that they are engaged in. And at the end of the day, mages are human. If your character is chosen to be the scion of the Sphinx, or your chantry becomes its center, Ragnarok Command is going to be very interested in what you're doing. Just because the pogroms have slowed down doesn't mean a sudden set of wins on behalf of the traditions in terms of maybe liberating long-held technocratic nodes, or the destructions of certain constructs, or beating back certain technocracy terranorming efforts isn't going to result in that reactivation. The game world is alive, the game world is moving. Consider what the ramifications of character actions are and have appropriate responses. The key to me is the strength of those responses and the amount of breathing space a group of players has between events determines theme and mood. So to me, paradox, people frequently talk about paradox as a threat in Mage. Paradox is not a threat unless you're in a very high tension game where you're constantly needing to use either vulgar or a lot of coincidental magic to survive, and you don't have a space to catch your breath, and you don't have enough time to recover willpower to maybe put that into your effects, or you don't have access to quintessence. So in a very high tension, high pressure game, paradox is legitimately a threat. So how frequently these events occur and how long your characters have to recover and to adjust to them is going to heavily influence the theme and mood of your game. So if you've already established those, try and pick a pace and try and pick a type of events that would play into that. The other problem that you run into with Metaplot is characters frequently want to engage with it. So if it's going to be background theme and mood, that's something where I would just state it, where I would say this is not a plot thread to be pursued now, that these rumors of the Sphinx is not a call for you to investigate the Sphinx unless you want it to be, and if so, we'll dedicate a session to it. So as Ken Haidt is fond of saying, the players are the worst red herrings. So just keep that in mind, depending on how much of the stuff you want to dangle at your table.
The one selling point that I'll try to persuade skeptics of the revised metaplot, again, not necessarily its details, but of using some version of it, whether you heavily modify it, lightly modify it, or use it whole cloth, is the one thing that I found that it did is it created messes. And if there's one thing that mages like, it's a hot mess. They love it. because mages are all about fixing the world, changing the world, solving problems, and parenthetically making problems. A lot of this metaplot are self-inflicted injuries from the awakened themselves. And so the revised metaplot offers a gigantic cosmic level mess for your players to have to encounter, deal with, to make friends with, to create alliances in, to fight against, or to make right, probably.
And compare notes. Big world-changing events that happen in one game can probably happen in another. Look through the forums, see if you find anything on the Discord. There's a bunch of options. Now, speaking of that, there is one glaring hole in the metaplot in that we receive no information, more or less, between, assuming that we don't count Ascension per se as a text as canon, we just don't really get anything between either 2004 and now, or 2013 and now, depending on if you take the last book of Revised, something like Transmission from the Rogue Council, or Technocracy Void Engineer, which only updates kind of for one faction. Michael, how the dink do we fill in it? Where can a storyteller look? Where could we look for information about what all the traditions have been up to and how they've changed over time?
Well, Terry, thank you for asking. It just so happens there is a book on the Storyteller's Vault that could potentially answer some of those questions for you. That was certainly the question I had. I was prepping for a game and I was like, how do I bridge what people are familiar with from previous editions to now? And so I began creating what became the Riddle of the Sphinx. I think of it as a story toolbox that offers options to help bridge the two editions with persons, places, and or things to kickstart the traditions in the 21st century. It largely focused on the traditions and how they responded to the Manifesto of the Sphinx, that being that paths of ascension are not created, they are explored. So if ascension is still or yet to happen, what could it look like? And when do we get the Bitcoin-obsessed dolphins? Terry, what is ascension and what are the paths to it?
So this is an interesting thing, and I never really consider the question of ascension to be core to a game, even though ascension and its definition is the cladding I use to literally define a tradition. A tradition to me is a group of people who have agreed on the thing that needs to be transcended to ascend. So you have the virtual adepts that want you to transcend your notion of substrate of what reality is. The dream speakers that want you to transcend your notion of what constitutes a person. Verbena wants you to transcend your notion of what you think civilization is. So the question of what is ascension, whether it is a personal thing or a mass thing, is a question I almost never address in my games, even though I have it as being like a key organizing principle. So you have the question of the Sphinx. Enigmas will take you where dogma cannot. The paths to ascension are not created but explored. So it really re-centers this as a phenomenon. And Mage never really tells us what ascension is, except for we kind of get the notion that you're not there anymore. We see, I think, one ascension in the entirety of Mage, and it's in the 2e core rules text where somebody is stabbed by a tree and ascends. And you're like, oh, okay. The easiest answer to the question of ascension is it's the friends we made along the way. If that's not the recurring understanding of things, I don't know what it is. Ascension could just be everyone else doing worse. This is a kind of material ascension where you're like, I don't need to win. Everyone else just needs to lose. To quote Gore Vidal, it is not enough that I succeed. Others must also lose. As well, my second favorite Gore Vidal quote being, there are fewer things more painful than to watch a friend succeed. And I'm like, I get you, Gore. I get you, Gore.
That was certainly Doazatep's version of ascension.
I am not rising, but everyone else shall fall.
I like to quote the Oracle Conan and just say ascension is seeing your enemies driven before you and hearing the lamentations of their women.
And the question then becomes, what is ascension more so than just personal victory? And in Mage, we get the idea that it is a point in which your paradigm or understanding of the world, depending on if you're playing M20, where paradigm never quite goes away, or Revised, where paradigm does. And kind of as you go up, you get this idea that you kind of see a more unified notion of the cosmos. We get the framework of open and closed paradigms and how people interact with other magics. So you have a notion of ascension as a magical thing. It is getting that 10th dot of a verite. It is so thoroughly transcending your tools that you are magic unto yourself. And everyone has a different view of that. And then you have archmasters who are like, can't hear you over the sound of gaining mastery and everything. But then you have the notion of, how do we bring other people with us? And this is where we go from individual ascension to mass ascension. Everyone's ascending, get on the SS ascension because this planet's being nuked. And we get a bunch of different versions of what this could consist of. The virtual adepts give us reality 2.0, the idea that we're going to build a better digital world and we're just going to leave our meat sacks behind. The technocracy says we are going to purge all deviance from reality and allow humanity to flourish. And it's one of the arguments I make is the technocracy is interesting, is that they have bought humans the ability to have enough spare time to think about what the meaning of life is, and then failed to give them a good answer to the question. And that is how the Nefandi have gotten in. That is kind of one of my answers to the question of how powerful they are in modernity. There could be a notion that we could thoroughly enlighten everyone enough that everyone gets to kind of coexist in their bubbles. Maybe we all return to the one. You have the hermetic idea of the city of Pymander, which if you read into the details of that as presented, it's like, yes, we will rule it as enlightened god kings. And we will tell everyone else how this is supposed to be. I'm like, that doesn't sound like ascension if you're just still kind of in charge.
Yeah, I mean, that's, in the outline I put Pymander maybe because, the Hermetics talk a lot about being the shepherds of men, right? And sort of like, we're going to rule over things because we know better and we're going to educate you and bring you until you're up to speed, and then everybody can rule, as if that's how it's going to go down. When I think ascension, to be honest, I think that's where the horror of Mage, that's where you get into sort of the existential horror of Mage. We get caught up in these sort of these utopian urges, whether it's a technocracy timetable or reality 2.0 or the celestial chorus's reconciliation, or quite frankly, Pymander, which is, I think, probably one of the most explicit sort of ideas of mass ascension that we get. But they're all terrible. They're all terrible. They're like, all boats rise, whether you like it or not, and so if that's sort of the urge within Mage, if that's sort of what's driving them, no wonder the Ascension War is such a chaotic mess. And then on the flip side, you've got people seeking personal ascension, and they're looking to be paragons of their own belief systems, and that can be incredibly solipsistic or even narcissistic, in its pursuit of the me. They're not even thinking about anybody else. They're thinking, I'm going to blaze this trail and everybody else can follow me, as if that would be even possible. You might be able to ascend, but did you leave any breadcrumbs about how to do it? How did you forge that path? What is the real path to reality 2.0? The virtual apps seem to, everyone's got the internet's everywhere and everybody's got a computer in their hand, but they're no closer to like freeing you from the meat space or like of information being free than they ever were.
6G, that'll solve it.
But 6G.
Yeah. But kind of one of the things
like
that
a G6, sorry.
Slightly different, yeah. Cut through the night. Scissor vodka. But one of the things that Michael brings up is kind of the idea of one direction you can go with this is a recentering of the notion of ascension as a thing that mages are actively pursuing, and the implementation of paradigm in the world around them to kind of establish their spheres of influence may become suddenly more important. You have a whole set of people who have opted out of this and chosen another way to become kind of more than human or beyond human. We get a couple examples of this. We have postulancy, where you more or less tie yourself up to the essence of a sphere or a shade realm. Maybe you decide to become an Umbrood. We have the idea that Lord Talos Perdix and Aelita, Lady of Feathers, were once mages, and through some process became spirits and seem to be doing pretty well on that front. But we also have the problem of, we have two pretty strong models of ruling your own reality. One is becoming a marauder and having a quiet so high you fall out of reality. The other one is pursuing Nephandic dissension, which we never get an example of, thankfully. And because of the paradox of the Book of the Fallen, it is the one paradigm where we literally get a system by which one can win.
Well, and I think
Book
that
of the
aside,
Fallen.
the one thing that we can say for the Nefandi is that the patrons are real. Like if Squidlord offers you a bargain, it may be lying, but it really is a, cosmic entity. Who's to say it's wrong? How do we know we're not wrong?
And you have the Nephonic presentation of the pure ones as not being the good guys, but just the ones that won. They're the ones who got to lay down the rules, and not everyone is happy with that. And that I can certainly understand.
Well, you can only make some of the mages happy some of the time.
Yes.
One person's ascension is another person's apocalypse. And again, that's where sort of the real horror of mage comes, because I think the virtual adept's idea of ascension is pretty much the antithesis of what most of the verbena want.
Yeah, or the Akasha would be, that to me
Right.
would be the direct opposite, or the Euthanatoi, where you're like, oh no, you're creating a separate thing. I think my favorite example of that is the 2E core rulebook that says the celestial course of the virtual adepts, they confuse the instrument for the note. And that has stuck with me since I cracked that book for the first time. But now we have this kind of framework of what happens when there is a recentered war for ascension, when reality does become a war for ideas, that maybe it is less focused on material concerns. Maybe you don't want a game where environmental apocalypticism is foregrounded, but is maybe a background threat, which is really causing a ramp up in pressure. And one of the places where your book shines, Michael, is that it covers all the traditions and all the factions seemingly in all of them. Do we want to do kind of a tour of those to give people an idea of maybe what you can do?
Yeah, I got some elevator pitches for each of the sub factions. The sub factions are really where I spent most of the time. And there are new NPC primi. If you want to use them, great. I think they're pretty cool. And I think that they in and of themselves embody sort of the broader view of that tradition's path to ascension. But the sub factions are really where I spent most of my time. That's the stuff that mostly interested me. And I thought that would be what would be most interesting to the players. How did each of these sub factions cope with the various meta plot changes? How did they transform, stagnate, or maybe just not get it together?
And this presents an interesting problem, because one of the things that we run into, at least in how I see Mage, is people will frequently pick a tradition and then kind of stop there. But if you want to, there is a whole layer beyond that, where if a tradition is an approach to ascension, or you take a previous edition's view and say tradition is culture, or you go all the way back to 1E and say tradition is just kind of a super chantry, and the 9 traditions we get are just a few out of many that form colleges, throughout reality. You have this built-in apparatus that you can have where you can say, yeah, we're all Akashiana or we're all Sahaja, but we are not on the same page in terms of the details. And faction games very much let you play around with that. Generally, traditions had at least one per essence, and then that was kind of exploded when Bill Bridges is like, nope, everyone gets 12. And you're like, oh, okay, we're doing that now.
Except the verbena, who only get 4.
Always have 4. Thanks, Steve Kinson.
No, they don't get. We don't get any more.
You don't get to have 4. Fun, and healing is harder for you. And we get a bunch, and they are fascinating. And one of the things that comes up is like, oh, these guys are real assholes. Why would anyone want to play them? Not everything in a tradition book is for a player. Asshole factions are great in the hands of a storyteller. Hagalas! I love the cultist presentation in Revised, because it creates a very menacing cult of ecstasy that I think is very interesting, as they kind of treat mortals as cattle in a way of saying, well, if you can't open yourself up to reality, I'm not wasting my time with you, in this very upper out way that would make a hermetic go, ha, whew, someone's being a little rough there. But this book is big. It's 200 pages. It is almost 100,000 words. Yeah. So let's just pick some of your favorites. You want to go through, pick a big idea or two, and then maybe a subfaction in each?
Each of the tradition, it opens up with sort of the big ideas that's going on with that tradition, and then it gets into each of the sub factions. And I even included some of the sub factions that sadly were left out from Second E. Some of them are very weird, particularly the Cult of Ecstasy. And I brought those back in just in case folks wanted to use them. Shout out to you and to all the Bongos Rangers fans out there. So Akashiana, reincarnation is a bitch. New recruits are returning, and they're mad about the past decisions that their elders made. Reckoning is just another trap in the cycle that must be overcome. So faction highlights, too many sub-factions, too many sub-factions.
To quote Patton Oswalt, all the factions. Yeah.
This was the one that I struggled the most. So
Just pick
so
one
many
or two.
sub-factions. Yeah. Gamlan, Golden Dragons chase Pentex and may have torched Duazatep to hide their own corruption. Or maybe Kunio Ashita just said, fuck it, and torched it himself. Wulong, all-female Wulong marry back into the Shiren families. But why? Do they come to help or harm? Are they in it with House Hong Li? Who knows? Can you help me with this? Is it the Changapa? Changagpa? Yes, thank you. Shady Akashic necromancers who stole secrets from the underworld that were so bad that they had to curse their own ancestral chantry when those chickens came home to roost. Now they're on the road avoiding ghosts, lying about everything, and trying to find a way out of the situation. It's a Hong Kong action buddy movie of kung fu death magic and dim sum.
And just a note, I literally host Mage the podcast, and going through this, I was like, do I remember them? I think I do. Do I remember them? No, I completely missed that. So if you're like, I have no idea what Michael and Terry are talking about, you can just introduce any of these factions as a chantry in your game. And you're like, well, I don't want to introduce the whole thing, but those Akashic Necromancers sound kind of cool, or maybe I don't even want to make them Akashic. Just consider these options for plot threads.
And it's also not really clear whether or not they are a cabal, whether or not they are a chantry, or whether, because like the Gamlung were introduced in the Book of Chantries in 1E as a cabal in Duezatep, and then are represented later in Revised as sort of a faction. But you also have Ashita and sort of so yeah, I mean, feel free to pick and choose. Also, the White Wolf Wikia, if we're mentioning, you can just do a search
for
there
days.
For
just
days, and
that'll
get you up to speed. So, all right, we ready for the Celestial Chorus?
I'm always ready for the Celestial Chorus.
You know, of the factions, of the traditions, I actually enjoyed the Celestial Chorus and the Society of Ether the most. And it's funny because they're sort of the ones that are least interesting to me. So, but I ended up loving writing the Celestial Chorus in particular. So I hope you guys like it as well. So big ideas. What happens when the end of the world scenario was kind of a false alarm, or was it Q left behind jokes? Chorus seeks unity, but only finds more divisions in a crisis. Too many pontiffs, not enough sheep. The new Pontimus Maximus versus the old Pontimus Maximus. Who will win? Find out on the next episode of 90 Day Fiance. The Celestial Temple of the Sun may be evil. Celestial Chorus is divided between guardian orders who want to tend to the sleepers, the theological orders who are focused internally on the chorus as an institution. Religious beliefs are nutty generally, but let me tell you folks, Christian transhumanism is something else entirely. All right, subfactions. Brothers of Saint Christopher. The psychic wars are coming. Better train the warriors. The chorus ignores them, so maybe they're a new craft. Theological orders. Monists push a radical theology of unity and silence anyone who doesn't agree. Septarians try to secede from the tradition, who they blame for their loss of power during the Mythic Age. Latitudinarians try to use anything they can to break the chorus hierarchy. And Anchorites have an oracle problem because the children of Alibi started a cult about the oracle who's visiting them. And then you have the Nashmiites who think, you know what, maybe the other worlds are really the problem. Lastly, Sons of Mithras and the Merovingians, those are second edition callbacks. Sons of Mitra are divided over which pontiff to serve. Long-haired kings, aka the Merovingians, could solve that problem with their money magic, but they need to levy an old tithe to do so. Will this lead to a civil war in the chorus, or will everyone just get paid?
Nice. Yeah. Of those options for Lore of the Traditions, I chose none. So
no one got paid?
No one gets paid. There is kind of a grand payout, but what about the Cult of Ecstasy?
Cult of Ecstasy, again, too many sub-factions.
Well, so the thing you mentioned about that with Revised, there was a clear division between traditions where the traditional membership was a noun. It was a thing you applied for and you got your letter from Hogwarts. And then there were other books that treated them as an adjective, where someone just described themselves as a cultist. There are some groups that just have this profusion of factions because it is more of a descriptive process of saying, well, this tradition seems to have this kind of people in it. What are we going to call them? When in other cases, like, there is no ambiguity as to what hermetic house you are in. Just a note, some of these are also huge because they cover a wide geographic area or cover literally more than 1 billion people.
Well, yeah, and the cult of ecstasy is so incredibly sprawling because you have the historicals, you have the dissidents, you have the political factions, you have the progressives. Can you really call it a tradition? After reading it, I was like, not sure. Big Ideas Reckoning was one hell of a hangover. Ecstatics should have seen it, but they missed it. What does that say about them? And what next? Maybe the Reckoning was just a venting of passions on a cosmic scale. Subfactions Canlu, Taoist monks who do ecstasy in China, seduce New World Order black suits with alchemical booze made from their own sex fluids. Now the technocracy is practicing mindfulness in their constructs. Is there a bridge built, or do the black suits just have conspicuously large pens in their pockets? News at 11. Okay, you mentioned Hagelas. I gave Hagelas a complete makeover. No longer metalheads, but inheritors of Viking animal cults who change shape and go Kool-Aid Man on reality. A cabal of Old Norse pagans, the Earls of Yggdrasil, are getting sleepers crunk on the fruits of the altar bowl. Yes, that is the world tree, and awakening them. The Trads created the technocracy in a cosmic level, maladaptive coping strategy. They are also trying to force a final reckoning on the traditions to allow the mages to prove their worthiness of ascension. That's going to go great. Then we had some second edition callbacks, the Ratyas.
Vratya is how I always said it, but yeah, or the Ka'a, the Vratya.
And slash the Ka'a. So the Ratyas are the old school ecstatic assassins who have quietly returned to the traditions to hunt Nephandic corruption. Are they the ecstatic answer to the Euthanatos Golden Trellis? And then you've got the Ka'a. Very strange, weird dream lady thomnivores that are keeping secrets from the rest of the traditions. What could they be hiding? Do you know where the Ka'a come from?
No idea.
I love them. They are so weird. It's just they're like dream ladies who suck the essential fluids from their male sleeping partners.
And I always like the fact that, like, within mage history, the Euthanatoi and the Cult of Ecstasy were real tight for a while, literally until Shazar came back and is like, "Stop doing that," and they're like, "Okay." Like, they were just full bore assassination for literally centuries. So
yeah, I thought the Ratyas or the Vratyas were very interesting, and we don't get a ton on them even later. Just maybe they were Shazar's bodyguards. They were supposedly at Horizon, but I thought that they could make some very interesting NPCs or even antagonists. All right, you ready for Dream Speakers?
I'm always ready for the Dream Speakers.
So of the Dream Speakers, of the traditions, I think the Dream Speakers were like, yeah, we saw this coming. We can go back to our ancient records and we have this tight relationship to the spirit world. So we were kind of ready for this. And since they were ready for it, they turned that into political gold for them. So politically, the Dream Speakers came out on top. Politically, they found common cause with one another.
So kind of what you're setting up is the fact that, oh no, we get the idea that in Mage that the gauntlet is cyclical, that it has been high before, and they go back and they say, we have ways of dealing with this, or we've dealt with storms of this sort before. We also get the idea that there are a bunch of ways to take advantage of familiars and spirits and natural phenomenon to do it, and they have the best archives, as it were. They have the Baruti have the best collection of that. They have some people with enough technological know-how to sidestep it using the digital web. And I think that's a really good way of turning this on its head, where people are like, oh, the Dream Speakers got hosed. And you can be like, this isn't their first rodeo. They have these tools at their disposal.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely. And if anybody's in touch with their past lives or they're like the deep well of wisdom, it's the Dream Speakers. The other thing that I wanted to change about them was that they're often depicted sort of as a little nice. Sometimes I think, and I'm just like, no, I think that they're people and they can just be as selfishly motivated as anybody else and who lets a crisis go to waste? Certainly not the Dream Speakers.
And even if not necessarily selfish, driven.
Precisely.
It is not the case that I want to take from you. It is the case that I have my agenda and I am going to accomplish it. So.
We're the experts on the gauntlet of the spirit world. Oh, you need a favor? I'm happy to do you that favor. Hey, remember that favor I did for you? Well, the tribunal's coming up, so you're going to vote this way. That was sort of my take on the Dream Speakers. All right, subfaction Spirit Smiths go high tech and discover a horizon realm. They learn to create magic power sources that awaken objects, including the internet. What could go wrong? My favorite Dream Speakers subfaction is the Ghost Wheelers. Shady spirit con men become spirits to con mages again and then get conned. They made a lot of deals and now they owe a lot of debts. Former Ghost Wheelers now sell everything from toasters to souls to fates and fortunes in the high Umbra auction houses. Sounds totally fine. Solitaries, rather than be jerks like the rest of the tradition, Dreamspeaker elders who were traumatized by the storm seek sanctuary to heal. They offer this idea to the other traditions. The other traditions are like, no thanks, we like jerks.
And I like the idea of introducing a high umbral auction house, of having the Grand Bazaar or something equivalent that they have decided to become masters of. That one of the ways that the group pivots is the fact that, okay, stepping sideways doesn't work, but we do have some members that work with traditions that walk through dreams, and they use the mind sphere, and that astral projection has no problem. It's just like, bye, not dealing with you. So I think that's an interesting way to take it. How about the Murder Raiders in Chief, the Euthanatoy?
Boy, the wheel sure sounds rusty. Maybe someone should oil it. With blood. How about hermetic blood? Purge of House Janissary and most of House Helicar. Unilateral action against fellow traditions will continue until the morale improves. Euthanatos are divided. Some go with Senex to guard the shard realm of entropy. From Vormas, others stay on Earth in the hopes of creating a ripple effect in humanity that will right the wheel. So do we try to fix things here on Earth, or do we fix things in the other world? Good example of cosmic solutions versus terrestrial or more personal solutions for the metaplot. So Terry, this brings us to the most important question of this episode. Which hermetic house would you marry, kiss, or unilaterally purge?
Okay. Kiss is House Shay. The Sishati, they do their homework, want to be on good terms with them, kind of a smooch. I'm not down to do that much research just to learn a single true name. Marry, are we allowed to include houses within House X Miscellanea?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yerbaton or Jerbaton or however the heck it's pronounced. They are listed as mundane affairs, but they're social diplomats. They are the core that interacts with other groups in my mind. They are the group that is most capable of seeing hermeticism everywhere and being a good host. They are the Boggins, as it were, of the Order of Hermes. And as a gossipy bitch, that's my natural home. I want to trade saw, and I want that saw to be in the form of tea. So
it's hermeticism, but make it fashion.
No one wants to do magic and have shitty food. So like that's simple ones.
Absolutely not.
And kill. So this is the tricky one.
Not kill, unilaterally purge.
Unilaterally purge.
Terry.
So like the one way is like, I don't want to kill people. So what house am I going to get rid of? Like, oh, I'll get rid of both members of House Bonnie Sages, or I'll get rid of like both member of the Crucibles of Thig or something like that. But I don't want to wipe out the Crucible of Thig because the Diamond Children are one of the only mage groups listed as being in the city of Philadelphia, and I don't want to wipe out my homeboys. But like, I don't know where House Chaos comes from. It's just like Discordianism and chaos magic, but poorly understood, to quote you. And I
would never say something like that.
I just don't need it. Like, the messy bitch is coming from inside the house. I don't see what they're adding. It's like one of those things where like they were added as a clerical error. Like the Onion headline of typographic error results in 40,000 acre skate park. Like, it's just like, oh, no, they're on okay.
Well, and their Primus may or may not be possessed by her own avatar.
Yeah, which is weird, but kind of cool, but mostly weird. Like, yeah, you're so strong-willed that you have to be. No, not seeing it. How about you, Michael?
Kiss. I'm the opposite of you. I would kiss House Yarbaton. I think I would marry House Fortune.
I forgot about
and
that.
I would unilaterally purge House Marinita. I'm sorry, you can't trust them. There have been changelings in that house. What's going on over there?
I don't know. I just don't want to be the person who purged the fairies. Like, that just, not a good look. Imho. But yeah, I forgot about House Fortune because they're bae.
You know, I think that's the fairy glamour working on you.
Emphasis on the glam. But yeah.
All right, let's do some
let's bring it home.
Some subfactions for the all right. The Mad Zimbabwe, African necromancers in a hate triangle with Ngoma and technocracy in southern Africa over the mythical city of Great Zimbabwe, which, by the way, may or may not exist in the Verbena seasonal realms. It's either going to be Indiana Jones, but make it fashion, or a really violent episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
I'm here for that.
How about the aided folks? Oops, we accidentally created an infernalist sect called the Order of the Black Willow. We couldn't get rid of them, so we violated an ancient geesh and cursed ourselves so that the Black Willow could never reincarnate. Then we uncursed ourselves because shit got real, and now the Black Willow is coming back in new bodies. And they also own a megacorp. And also, we kept all of this a secret, but at least we didn't murder an entire hermetic house, right?
Yes.
All right, and last we've got Albrio. We are the necromancer lawyers who represent the assassins who purged the entire hermetic house. Call our 1-800 number to hire us when you want to purge a hermetic house. Rather than apologize, we decide to cooperate with the tradition whose house we purged and then create a new, better, totally transparent internal security force called the Vigiles. This totally is not a plan to monitor the Order of Hermes in case another house needs purging. So just a metaplot in Revised, the Albrio became the internal security for the traditions. I did not agree. I did not think the Hermetics were going to be like, that's fine. We apologize. When, have the Hermetics apologized anything? Have they ever apologized?
It's interesting where it's like they killed them off and then they became diplomats. I do like Alex Morrow as a character though, so he's kind of got that dreamy emo eye. So look at the cover of Tradition Book Euthanatos for more information. But I mean, the question is like, reading Blood Treachery, I want a comic that says, oh, so the Euthanatoi are breaking into the Order of Hermes and wiping out houses for their poor decisions. Two can play that game, and just that person is entitled House Titulus, or alternative Quasitor or something like that. But yeah, the Alberio are a pretty fascinating thing to pop up. And it's just a reminder of how much stuff there is in Revised, especially in comparison.
So much stuff.
It just keeps going.
Yeah. And the Euthanatos Revised Tradition book, it absolutely... It's great.
It has so much stuff in it. They had to shrink the font so that Malcolm Shepard could fit all the Malcolm Shepard in there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it really is excellent. I think the Revised Tradition books overall are pretty good. The Order of Hermes tradition books have always been excellent, but the Euthanatos one is really, really good. Speaking of the Order of Hermes, we get the most information about Hermetics in Revised because of Blood Treachery. Okay, maybe we blew up the most powerful chantry in the Chalarian, which maybe crashed the digital web and kicked off a giant umbral storm. We also started a war with vampires who used to be members of our tradition, but none of that has slowed us down or made us apologize. The Order has a rich history and never says die. The Order of Hermes refocuses its knowledge creation and education as a means of shepherding the awakened and sleepers to ascension. Order of Hermes. Why fix what isn't broken? New houses, Hongli, Nagoma, Slifikati bring fresh life to the Order. Also, there's a lot of Horizon realms in this section, just saying. So, sub-factions, House Bonnie Sagas, the Sphinx brought all the wizards to the yard, and they said, you like Horizon realms. No, seriously, the one scholarly realm of Durin-Mar, which is the ancestral chantry of House Bonnie Sagas, is taken over as a temporary Concordia. What's a professional woman to do? Not only is the Primus taking meetings, but the Grogs may strike. Also, this is a college chantry that was largely ignored because it wasn't a target, but now it's a target, so it's going to need to be fortified. I wasn't down with the new council meeting at a film studio in New Zealand. That hurts me. The lack of any imagination.
I'm going to describe it as low energy. And anywhere that the Lord of the Rings could have been filmed, unless it's a Verbena seasonal realm, I'm like, we can do better.
Yeah, so I thought, why wouldn't the Order of Hermes, or there's got to be some realm left out there that they could meet in? I thought Durin-Mar. So
yeah, just as a giant effing flex, being like, oh, by the way, we have this as a spare.
Let's be honest. The only traditions that would possibly have an event space would be the Society of Ether or the Order of Hermes. And really, it's the Order of Hermes. They were all about event spaces. All right, we have House Fortina. We created our own ancestral chantry, and it's inhabited by gambling addicts. Also, we may be conspiring with Nagoma to form our own tradition or craft. I give some cool cabals for you to use or abuse. Agents of Fortune, trickster communists with a penchant for cosmic five-finger discounts, here to wreak havoc on technocratic casinos with vulgar magic and lightning. They aren't the Toftani, we swear. Cloud Talkers. By the way, we found this number stations in the Umbra reading off Enochian codes. We think it's a source of a Horizon realm which contains the true name of Ascension. No big. By the way, the Cloud Talkers were, I believe they come from the first edition Order of Hermes book. They were Navajo code talkers that joined the Order of Hermes. I thought that was rad. So I brought them in as an official cabal. Lastly, One-Eyed Royals. We are a bunch of game magicians who literally play poker against the technocracy with the fates and fortunes of reality at stake. Why worry? Lastly, we've got Slificati. We came out of the alchemist closet where we have been hiding for centuries as a result of the reckoning. What we found, we didn't like, so we left and we created a craft. Those of us who didn't stay to try to unify awakened society using the Order of Hermes as their instrument. Oh, also, we also found a horizon realm of a problematic archmaster named Fiametta. It contains a reliable blueprint for archmastery, but also that blueprint might be evil. Also, he may or may not have just went to the store. Be right back. Lastly, we've got Marinita. While we aren't the largest house, we showed up in force with a bunch of new recruits with a very zealous attitude towards the Middle Ages LARPing. Let's forget the fact that we have a history of fairy wizards, body swapping and all. Not suspicious at all.
Zealous Marionita is just a term I don't know that I want to hear. It's like one of those things where you use it as a way of like calibrating a new microphone. And you're like, I don't know how I like that. I like the seriously, we're not Toftani kind of angle that you have there. And I just want to know what an Enochian number station is. That sounds pretty BA. And the idea of having a 6 or 7 dot, I am forgetting the term for a book that teaches you magic, not primer.
Grimoire.
Thank you. Like having a 6 or 7 dot grimoire kicking around out there. And the only previous one we got was actually like the Yellow King or something in the Red Sign, because that book is wild. So
that's not evil.
Yeah. It's just
That's
different.
Fine.
We've been over that.
It's not.
Everything's
It's just different.
Yeah,
it's just different.
Don't yuck
than the other
his
books.
yum.
It's just bound in human flesh that occasionally rise, and sometimes eyes open in it. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, we all go through those phases. You don't want to see me before I put my face on.
Yeah, during puberty, I had a whole skin thing.
Yeah, just. Anyway, the Society of Ether.
Big idea. Math is hard. Running a scientific society is harder. The Reckoning really kicked this society in the nads. Science never says die. But without all the British men, we found even more inspiration. But actually, we still need a few of them just to keep us in balance. No, seriously, we need to make stuff the sleepers can actually use because we won't get a second chance. All right, subfactions, Ethernauts, the storm grounded us, and we're still trying to figure it out. Some of us are trying to garrison our bases on Mars and its moons. Some of us are training to colonize another solar system by training Etherite versions of extraordinary citizens. So one of the solutions I thought is, for this, I just want to take a note, is fuck Earth. Why bother? The technocracy owns it. We can go to another planet and have our ascension there.
Yeah. Hey, boss, why is the name of the ship the SS Acceptable Losses? Oh no, it's an old Hermetic phrase. We picked it up from them. It means something in Latin. Don't worry about that. Just get on. Yeah.
We were going to name it SS Masasa, but it turns out that's copywritten.
Oops. Yeah.
Yeah, I also wondered why we never got, like, you've always said why there aren't more technocratic crafts. Why are there no more technomantic sorcerer? And I was like, why wouldn't the Etherites be training some bananas version of that with like ray gun gothic and, like suits and hypertech, wandering around. So I thought that might be a cool opportunity for storytellers to run with. All right, Cybernauts, we broke up with the VAs over the crash. Probably most of us are in relationships with robots anyway. Oh, and by the way, we found a way to prevent another crash, but it requires us to totally rewire the digital web to only work with our difference engines. It also might involve transferring consciousnesses from alternative timelines. Don't worry, we got this. Adventurers, now that shit got gritty, the society suddenly wants our science. We created a new journal called Escapedia. We also may have found a shard realm of Prime in the Hollow Moon, but also maybe it has been invaded by psionic dinosaurs from another dimension. Anyone? Dissidents during the Reckoning? Pretty much everyone went crazy, and that created a demand for deadly weapons of cosmic destruction again. Someone's funding us, but who? Is it Special Projects Divisions? Is it Mander's World? Check out the book to find out.
I like the idea of there being this Ascension version of the only thing that can stop a bad mage with the ability to direct a comet towards Earth is a good mage that can direct a comet towards Earth, or something like that. And this is our mage Second Amendment rights faction, finally.
Well, you know what? That's canon, weirdly enough.
With the Xyz, yeah.
Yeah. Well, no. It goes back before. No, it's like there's a whole thing about the utopians stopping the dissidents from creating, like, disallowing the society from creating deadly weapons. All right. So there's this whole weird sort of ethical thing sort of under the radar in the Society of Ether. It's pretty, and I thought, I'm going to go with that. So there's a lot of ethical dilemmas going on in the Society of Ether chapter for sure.
The SS trolley problem is another famous ether ship.
I am definitely, the next time I do an Etherite adventure, I'm definitely going to have the SS trolley show up.
Yeah. How about on the other end of the spectrum in terms of science and technology, where do you see the Verbena possibly going?
The Reckoning was, so the Verbena are like, the Reckoning was our fault. We must make amends with blood, but not the hermetic blood. We're just sort of sacrificing animals. So the paths of the Wick are really weird now, and that leads to all kinds of strange places. Also, by the way, the seasonal realms are kind of broken. Elders are inquired in Winter Castle. There's a mass human sacrifice, weird runes in a pregnant tree in Spring Cottage. The summer's totally missing. Stuff's weird. Come for the weirdness, stay for the human sacrifice. All right, subfactions. Gardeners, as witch royalty, most of our members were stuck in Horizon realms. We were caught up in the search for perennial wisdom, which may or may not exist. Winter Castles has our Scions of witch royalty stuck in a Tolkien-esque mindscape, and if we don't get them out, the realm's blood oak will die, and the realm will turn into a cosmic ice cube. Life Weavers, hey, what doesn't kill you makes you weirder. We went into the storm's winds and somehow came out with cool mutations that don't cause paradox. While we wouldn't cause another storm necessarily come back, we also wouldn't be mad if one showed up because it was kind of cool. Also, some of us are now awesome at city magic and the art of desire. Twisters of Fate, we literally are trying to bend all of Awakened Society to our wills using mythic threads and edibles. There is also some witch wandering around giving out candy apples, deadly quests, and loyalty tests.
I like each of those more than the last. I'm just putting those out. But like, I just picture the in-world thing for like the Life Weavers saying like with a quote like, storm brings winds, but it also brings rains. And that is their justification for things like that. I always like when mage groups like couch what they're doing in that term as you go on. And the fight within the gardeners to be like, oh, we lost the gardeners. We should bring them back. And just like no one really putting their back into it, and just the mythic thread that the Twisters of Fate pull on, being Toad the Wet Sprocket or something like that, and just using.
I loved the Twisters of Fate. I thought they were such a cool sub-faction. I had really not dug into the Verbena, and of the Verbena, I thought the Twisters of Fate were really cool. So I spent a lot of time with them, and they have a really cool, very mythic sort of story going on.
Yeah, what's the one? No, I'm thinking of the Moonseekers, where someone suddenly like Tarot, Doc Martens. But it's the only canonical Doc Martin I know of in Mage, so that kind of stuck out to me. Needed to keep that one on lockdown. Last but far from least, the Virtual Adepts. What's happening with the to-be-known as Mercurian Elite?
We got everything we wanted, but Ascension still didn't happen. Also, the crash was really a bummer. And maybe if we created tools the sleepers could actually use, they would listen to us instead of the technocracy. All right, subfactions, Chaosticians. We warned you, and you didn't listen, so there. Also, the storm is kind of a good thing because now there's more of the X factor, and we don't mean that we renamed our alt X. What we mean is that there's more potential for change. We want to exploit it. A couple of cabals in here that you can use. Framers of the Council, we are literally trying to solve Ascension War through social engineering. We will study all of Awakened society, including orphans, Nefandi, and the technocracy. What could go wrong? The Weathermen, we are awakened meteorologists, and we study umbral weather and the Avatar Storm in the hopes of preventing another one.
I like that you and I both independently came up with a group that called the Weathermen that tracked the Avatar Storm. The one difference is I made them sorcerers.
Oh.
One of the things that I've had in games that use the Avatar Storm is the Awakened are not able to keep track of it. And that is just, for whatever reason, the nature of it, they are not able to predict its nature or where it's going to be, but sorceress magic has the ability to do it. We get a hint in Revised that there are certain things that only sorcery can do, like creating and maintaining myth, the weird kind of sideway realm that only exists in Dead Magic 2. Yeah, that there are certain magic phenomena that can only be affected properly by static magic because it interacts weirdly with awakened magic. But yeah.
My book assumes that the storm is over, but could potentially recur. But if you said it during easily these folks emerged as a response to the storm. So for me, I was really surprised that didn't appear in Revised because it is so obvious.
Yeah, the closest we get is the Nephandic road of Between the Raindrops that helps you navigate past.
Oh, yeah. I just think the other thing that I kind of didn't get about Revised was the mages, like from a Metaplot standpoint, don't seem that interested in like doing root cause analysis
Yeah.
of the storm.
Yeah.
Like they're just sort of like, oh no, it's terrible. I guess we'll just chantry and stuff. I was like, wouldn't you want to know? And I'm like, it's like, did they all know that like what happened at Duez's stuff? Because my book assumes that no one knows and that they're all trying to still figure it out, right? And that
Piece together
that
that,
like
that photo story. Yeah.
yeah. So Weathermen. Yeah, I think that's obvious. Last but not least, Explorers. So yeah, the crash nearly wiped us out and we almost went nuclear on reality, but the reality coders convinced us not to via an anime version of Muppet Christmas Carol. We're feeling better now, but the web sure is wrecked. Martian Wi-Fi. We found version web on Mars and think that the digital web is either the dreaming consciousness of a Lovecraftian old god or some interstellar communication network. It's crashed before, and that led to the fall of whoever was living on Mars a billion years ago. We're going to make some bodies and try to convince the Aetheros to drive us to Mars so we can check it out.
And I just want to say, Michael, this is wildly creative in the best possible way. I love it. It gives you the wacky that Mage doesn't often do by itself. Every book introduces a few, but this is a book of these. And on top of that, you have new potential primi in every cases and a step-by-step walkthrough. Again, I didn't even know all the groups and subgroups that you mentioned, so I'm pretty sure not every listener is going to. We've done previous episodes on that, but also hit the wiki as you're going through. And again, use these as a starting point. None of these are particularly tied directly to a faction. If you want to make it part of a subfaction, you can just make it a cabal. That was a whirlwind tour. Any final thoughts on the work, or maybe something that you haven't mentioned before, or any recommendations to listeners on how to use all this stuff that you made?
How to use it? I hope you love it, but I also hope that you hate love it. Meaning I'm sure you all have those things where you hate something so much that it produces a little pearl. It gets in your little RPG clamshell and you just hate it. It just irritates you so much that you produce something really great of your own. So if you get this book and you're like, I hate this. This is all terrible. I could have done this so much better. Then this book has worked its magic on you. But if you show up and you love it and you think the ideas are great in it, I put my heart into this. It is my love letter to Mage and all it has to offer. I would love to hear if you end up using any piece of it, even if you adapted of it. Like we said before, all this stuff is optional. It's all written in a very open-ended way. I don't answer any of the questions. It's meant as a jumping off point, a springboard, so you can answer all of those questions in your game. It is available on the Storyteller's Vault. It is a super long book, so it is kind of on the expensive side. However, during certain times of the year, there may be a half-off sale. There was a half-off sale when Lore of the Traditions. It's a good fit for any edition, even if you don't want to use the revised Metaplot. And I think it'll be a good complement to Lore of the Traditions because we really didn't get much sub-faction information in that book.
Yeah. Yeah. You did not have the 9,000 word restriction that we did.
I did not, which is why it's as long as it is.
Yeah. You use liberally from the Mage art packs from across all the editions, and it is a lovely walkthrough. You use them mostly as tiny corner pieces to keep on moving because you don't have space for full page art because you've got 9 traditions to get through, and you do it. Additionally, one of the other things that you provide is a paradigms practice and instrument section for each of the groups that you bring up, which if you were looking for a way to bring that into M20 with a little bit more guidance and maybe see how this group does it in comparison to this other one, it is there. If you're curious how the Dissonant Society versus Club Works would do something, it's in there. Michael, thank you for your love letter to Mage. If we're interested in what else you're doing, is there any place we can find you online, or should we just look for you in the Discord and on Storyteller Vault?
You can look for me in the Discord on Storyteller's Vault. No official author page yet.
Well,
yet.
Yeah.
We'll see if I can get somebody to tell me that the name of one of my NPCs is dumb. An official Mage book.
Yeah, maybe.
I want to thank you, Terry, because this book was very much inspired by Mage the podcast. I started listening during the pandemic and started running a Mage game. And this came out of all of that. So none of this would be possible without the inspiration and also the patient and detailed walkthroughs of each of those books. That was really an inspiration. And also Genflow something on Discord, who very, very patiently read through all 200 pages of this in each tradition and gave me a lot of really wonderful feedback. It would not be the same without her. So thank you very much. She has a book called, is it Adventures to Hollow Earth?
Adventure to Hollow Earth. We did an interview with Jenna about her
Yeah.
work, and that is available.
Yeah.
We'll include a link to that in the show notes. I guess my last question is, those write-ups that you did for that Mud Wiki, do they still exist? Or...
Yes, they do. Those became these, but I have
okay.
the originals still. Yeah.
Because a lot of those were kind of an as of, and where this is seemingly you take that and you run with it for a little bit. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Terry. Bye, Mage fans.
This has been Mage the Podcast, where we fully recognize that if it's not part of the canon and you use it, it's just plot, not metaplot, and where we filled in the missing decade in Mage between the end of Revised and the start of M20 by mostly listening to mumblecore and shoegaze. This show has been brought to you by its executive producers. You can join them at patreon.com/magethepodcast, and first we have the oracles of the following revised revelations. Ben Bendelow, Oracle of the Akashic Revelation that most of the Ancient Masters are actually 3 kids in a trench coat. Buck Gregory, Oracle of the Chorister Revelation that most of them went to church because they didn't want to disappoint their parents. Christopher Phillips, Oracle of the Ecstatic Revelation that most were actually California sober when they realized they were using drugs instead of going to therapy. Guy Stewart, Oracle of the Dreamspeaker Revelation that Laughing Eagle had really hoped that the Lodge of the Gray Squirrel was going to be the Lodge of the Ground Squirrel because of his constant love of chipmunks. Jay Widener, Oracle of the Euthanatory Revelation that Alex Mora was caught on tape saying, "I took out a hermetic house, and if I get bored, I'll do it again, gosh darn it." Josh Hillerup, Oracle of the Hermetic Revelation that the most popular house in the Order was actually Crowded House, the late 20th century Australian rock band. McHale, Oracle of the Aetherite Revelation that all of them were secretly trying to create flubber from the absent-minded professor, but had not yet succeeded. Pukaji, Oracle of the Silificati Realization that Halel's betrayal meant that 7% of the tradition was composed of traitors. Sean Gallagher, Oracle of the Bettini Revelation that the real doctrine of unity was the friends we made along the way. The Crew of Erebus, Oracle of the Council Revelation that Senex had a Brazilian butt left after being called flat-ass by Indrani Toxing. Saint UX Player, Oracle of the Hollower Revelation that their real betrayal was not to the traditions but to themselves for selling out to the man. Jason Vines, Oracle of the Verbena Revelation that they all think unicorns are secretly super tasty. Derek Semsek, Oracle of the Virtual Adept Revelation that despite their technical prowess, none of them actually know how to program a VCR. Along with Archmaster Andrew Edelstein, Archmaster Brad the Blue, Archmaster Dan Svensson, Archmaster Leroy Bryce, Archmaster Morgan Aran, Archmaster Nathan Weaver, Alex, Alexia, Ambiversion, Anders S., Anon, Badurfi, Berto, Blaze Hibbert, Blake Ryan, Brandon, Bryce Perry, Bubba the Pale One, Chris Blakes, and Shodas, Connor Glosson, Daniel Cuppen, Daniel Scribner, Darren Hennessy, David Roy, Dennis Osborne, Eli Levenger, Eric Schwenk, Fragerrock, George Lara, Gray Trillig H, Henry Kraft, Ia Bolt, Jason Duncan, Jason Kennedy, Jason W. Breaks, Jay Gatsby, Jeff Bryn, Jenna F., Jervis Johnson, John Magnuson, Jolyn Andes, Laws and Stuff, Kathleen Halperin, Kevin Fitzpatrick, Chris Kinner, Leslie Weatherstone, Manel Canos, Matthew Prohl, Maurice Hopkins, Michael Creedle, Michael Parker, Nibero, Neil Patterson, Nikita Klamanoff, Paxcal, Patrick McNamara, Patrick Mulder, Rachel Grace, Ricardo, Richard Bat Brewster, Robart the Robot, Ryan Stray, Rob H., Ryan Kendi, Samuel Tobin, Seven Esses, Starfish, Stephen Carton, Steve Wynyard, Thrice Great, Tyler Bryan, Vincent Hamilton, Walter, William Conley, William Martin, and Wolf Larryson. Our EP shoutout in this episode is to Connor Glosson. The name had no Wikipedia entries, which is normally the first thing I go to, and for some reason when I put it in there, it gave me the complete works of Dolly Parton. So I'm taking this as a sign from the cosmos that I need to talk about Dolly Parton. Here are some things I learned about Dolly Parton's musical catalog. American country singer-songwriter Dolly Parton has composed over 5,000 songs throughout her career. The total number of individual song titles she has recorded and released is 956, totaling over 1,100 individual recordings when studio recordings, remixes, and live tracks are combined. Parton holds the record for the most #1 hits by a female country artist at 25 and the record for most top 10 country albums on the Billboard Top Country Album chart at 41. She's previously held the record for the most top 10 hits by a female country artist until Reba McEntire surpassed her in 2009. With her 56th top 10 country hit, Cowgirls Don't Cry. Parton is the first artist to have top 20 hits on Billboard's Hot Country Singles Chart in 6 consecutive decades from the 1960s to the 2010s. And when I think of Dolly Parton's back catalog, which mostly comes up in the form of me periodically getting Jolene stuck in my head, I'll think of you, Connor. And with that, I think I've done a shout out to every executive producer. It's taken me 2.5 years, but I've done it. So if you want to support the show and get a shout out, now's a real great time to start. If you'd rather listen on YouTube, search Mage the Podcast on YouTube to find our full library there. And if you super like this episode or super didn't, drop us a line at magethepodcast@gmail.com or at magethepodcast on Twitter. We have a hop-in Discord community at discord.me/magethepodcast. Mage the Podcast is also on Mastodon. If you like us, please give us a review on the platform of your choosing or tell a friend about us. Also go to magethepodcast.com for show notes and all of our previous shows. Now, go change reality.